A lot of us are still confused when and how to use must and have to. Karamihan nga naman sa atin ay nalilito pa kung paano at saan dapat gamitin ang modal verbs na must and have to. Let's take these two sentences as an example. I must eat my breakfast at 8. And I have to eat my breakfast at 8. Now, is there any difference between these two sentences? Perhaps some of you would say na meron. And maybe some of you would say na wala. Pero ano nga ba? Well, in this video lesson, tuturuan ko kayo kung paano gamitin ang must and have to. Hi everyone, this is Teacher Renz and welcome to my class. Before we get started, if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And please, click the notification bell para updated ka sa mga bago kong videos. As what I have mentioned a while ago, we're going to crack one of the most common confusion in English, the usage of must and have to. I admit that these two are really confusing to use. Even me. Before I got to university, I didn't know how to correctly use them. Like for me, they're just the same. Parehas lang. But when I started studying English seriously, I found out that English has many rules. And when we say rules, they have to be followed. But don't worry, because today, I'm going to teach you how and when to use these two modal verbs. Now let's start. Must and have to are modal verbs. When we say modal verb, it is a verb such as can, could, must, and might that is used with another verb to express an idea such as possibility, obligation, and necessity that is not expressed by the main verb of a sentence. Meaning, modal verbs are also helping verbs. When we say helping verb, ito yung verb na nagsisilbing pantulong sa ating main verb. Like in this example, she might be late. The first verb in the sentence, which is might, is the modal. And the main verb here is be. So this sentence expresses possibility. So if we remove the modal might in the sentence, it will have another meaning. So that means when we are trying to express something, modals are necessary. English modal verbs include can, could, must, have to, will, might, and etc. And all modal verbs require a simple verb to follow them. When we say simple verb, ito yung tinatawag nating base form of the verb. Like in this example, eat, ate, eaten. So eat is the simple verb or the base form, ate for the past form, and eaten is the past participle. And the pattern here is modal verbs plus the base form of the verb. So we can't say she must ate, but we have to say she must eat. Again, modal verbs plus the base form of the verb. Going back to must and have to, these two modal verbs are both used to express an obligation, a responsibility, or necessity, but there are some small differences. Let's start with number one. Who made the obligation? Let's take these two sentences as an example. I must write a letter to John, and I have to write a letter to John. Now, if we try to look at these two sentences, they look and sound really the same, right? But no, there's a difference. Let's crack it down. Alright, we will start with the first sentence. I must write a letter to John. I use the modal verb must here. Now, we generally use must when the speaker decides that something is necessary to do or something is necessary to be done. In this case, I decided that I need to write a letter to John and nobody else has told me to write it, and I think it's necessary. So, when we are talking about a personal idea, we have to use must. Now, let's have the second sentence. I have to write a letter to John. As what you can see, I use the modal have to in the sentence. Now, we use have to when somebody else other than the speaker has made a decision. It could be your mom, it could be your boss, it could be your sister, or anybody. So here, I didn't decide to write a letter to John. Somebody else told me to do it, and somebody told me that it was necessary to do. So when we're talking about an impersonal idea or like an obligation or a decision that is made by somebody for you to do, you have to use have to. Now let's have some more examples for you to understand them better. Let's start with the first one. I must clean my house this weekend. In this sentence, I am reminding myself that it's necessary to do it. I decided that it's necessary to do it. Another example, I have to wear a uniform at work. In this case, my boss makes me wear a uniform. It is an obligation that my boss has decided that is necessary. So I, the speaker, I'm not making this obligation. Someone else is. In a nutshell, if you make the obligation yourself, must ang gagamitin natin. But if somebody else makes the obligation for you, have to ang gagamitin natin. Very simple, right? Now let's have the second one. When we are talking about someone else's obligation, then we have to use the correct conjugation of have to. For example, Susan and Steve have to pay their rent every Friday. Now they both have the obligation to pay their rent on that day. In this case, we should only use the modal have to. Again, when we are talking about someone else's obligation, we should only use the modal have to, not must. All right? Now let's have the third one. For questions, what are we going to use? Is it must or have to? Let's have these two sentences. When do you have to finish the report? When must you finish the report? Well, there's really nothing wrong about these two sentences. But if you want to sound more natural, you have to use have to. Must sounds too formal, and this is more common in British English. So for questions, if you want to sound more natural, it is better to use have to. Okay? Now let's have the final one. Must in different tenses. Must is only used in the present tense and sometimes to express the future. We use a form of have to for the other tenses. The past form of must is had to. For example, I had to leave work early yesterday. I had to make an appointment yesterday. Now, the future tense of must is will have to. I will have to work early tomorrow. I will have to sleep early tonight. However, sometimes must is also used to express future obligation. I must leave work early tomorrow. So again, must in different tenses. We only used must in the present tense and future tense. And the past form of must is had to. And the future form is will have to and must. Now, this time, let's have a recap. Number one, when someone makes an obligation for you, you have to use have to. But if you make an obligation yourself, you have to use must. Number two, when we are talking about someone else's obligation, we have to use have to. We cannot use must here. The third one, for questions, have to or must are okay to use. But if you want to sound more natural, I do really encourage you to use have to, since have to is more common and must sounds too formal and it's more common in British English. So have to is better. For the fourth one, must in different tenses, we used must to express present tense and future. So the past form of must is had to, and the future is will have to and must. Okay? So that's it for today's class. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something from me. This is Teacher Renz again, and see you in my next class.